Good evening, all. I hope all are going doing good. So, I thought I have taken a long leap. Sorry for the inconvenience, and I'm assuring you guys that I would be continuing properly from now. So, today, what I'm going to teach you guys is chapter 14, respiration in plants. It's one of the important topics in biology, class 11th NCRT, from NEET perspective, as well as other entrance examinations in which biology um, takes part priorly. So let us start. I'm just today in this video I'm just brushing up the basics which you need to be thorough in this particular topic, that is respiration in plants. Okay, so respiration in plants. The first, let us start with introduction. Before that, there are totally 7 topics under the topic respiration in plants. Do plants breathe? Second is glycolysis. Third is fermentation. Fourth is aerobic respiration. Fifth is the respiratory balance sheet. And sixth is amphibolic pathway. Seventh is respiratory quotient. Respiratory quotient. Okay, we all knew that respiration is one of the important uh, process that takes place in our body to make our life essential. So, what do you mean by respire? Respiring means some can say it's just taking breathe. Okay, what do you mean by breathing? That means taking air in and taking the air in and taking the air out of the body simultaneously. And it is a continuous process also. So you would say, because now you are in grade 11, you may say that we are taking in oxygen and giving out carbon dioxide. Okay, but for the respiration in plants, that's the topic which we are going to study today. For the plants, it's actually, do you think it is the same as photosynthesis process? No, right? There must be some difference that must be different in photosynthesis in plants as well as respiration in plants. Okay, let us see in further details in this chapter. Okay, okay. To continue with, so to continue with, there must be some difference between the respiration process in plants and photosynthesis process in plants. And to tell you something, that both these processes are vice versa, actually just opposite to each other in plants. Don't you just believe that? Okay, we all know that living organisms have different characteristics that must be fulfilled. Some are defining as well as some are non defining. For example, movement, absorption, transport, reproduction, even breathing. In all these things, some are satisfied by most of the living organisms, but some are not satisfied. And moreover, movement is is a characteristic that can be even satisfied by a non-living or non-living organism. So we can say that the food we eat should be utilized by our body. And why are we consuming food? We are consuming food for providing energy to our body. That's the main use of food which we consume. So, how this energy is utilized by our body? That is what we are going to study in this chapter. Okay, let's start. So, I think we can start with the introduction. All of us breathe to live, but why breathing is essential so to life. So, this is what I was discussing earlier, right? So, we can skip this part, and I have also discussed about some of the important characteristics of living organisms. So, we can also skip that. And moving to third, the third thing which I discussed right now is how do we provide energy to our body. So, you would say that it is by eating food. We just eat food, and from that, we get energy, and from that energy, we do all our day to day activities. So, if you think from that food, how do we get energy? That is what we are going to mainly focus on in this chapter. So, if we go over the last paragraph in this first page, all the energy required for life process is obtained by oxidation of some macromolecules that we call as food. Only green plants and cyanobacteria, please note, green plants and cyanobacteria can prepare their own food by by the photosynthesis process. You guys know that what is photosynthesis process is. It is nothing but trapping sunlight energy and converting it into chemical energy, which is stored in the form of carbohydrates. And carbohydrates have different form, right? One is glucose, simplest form is glucose, and the other known forms are sucrose and starch. Next, we must also remember that in green plants too, and cells and tissues and organs, photosynthesis takes place, but only in specific cells in plants called chloroplasts. Because they are containing chlorophyll, which is very essential for the photosynthesis process. So, you must be thinking, okay, if the plants are green, if it is the category of green plants, there would be no problem. Chlorophyll would be there in chloroplast and it would be synthesizing its own food. But what about the non-green plants? Because they also need food for their oxidation. So there are some parts which are not green in a plant also, not only stem. um, what about you? You guys can consider that if some is yellowish, means it which is not green in color. I am specifically talking about the parts which are not green in color. So if they do not have food, then how do that particular part would survive? So food should be translocated. Translocation, another process. Please note, translocation is movement of food or supply of food from one part of the plant to another part is called translocation. Please note, it's an important process because all the parts of a plant are not green. So, food prepared by the green parts would be supplied to the non-green parts. And we also know that plants are autotrophic because they prepare their own food. But we also knew that animals are heterotrophic. That means they obtain food from plants directly. That is, the animals which obtain or consume food, consume plants as their food, are herbivores, or animals which just attack on other animals are carnivores, right? You know that is a basic thing. And there is another kind of organisms called as saprophytes or saprotrophs in is the another name. So saprotrophs or saprophytes like fungi are some of the organisms which are dependent on dead and decaying matter. Dead and decaying matter is nothing but the organism which are dead. You must be wondering that what happens after uh, a particular animal is dead. How does it get decayed and get dumped into the ground? It is the role of saprophytes like fungus, which feed on the dead and decaying matter and clean the environment. And it's a cyclic process. All the plants of different categories has its own main functions and different important functions, major functions. So what is important to recognize is that ultimately all the food that is required for life processes comes from photosynthesis. So food prepared by the plants is ultimately coming from the process called photosynthesis. You guys, if you just confused with the term, you just simply break down the word photo. Photo means light. Synthesis means to make down. That is process of making something, synthesizing. So putting together we get photosynthesis is preparing using light. So what would be usually prepare? Food, right? So process of making food by plants using light, which is called as photosynthesis. And this chapter mainly deals with cellular respiration, which we can say the mechanism of, please note, this is a definition: cellular respiration, the mechanism of breakdown of food materials within the cell to release energy and trapping of this energy for synthesis of ATP. You do you guys know what is ATP? ATP is also called as energy currency of cell because it provides energy to the plant cell. And the full form of ATP, you guys know, I hope. Even then, I just mentioned adenosine triphosphate. It is the expansion of ATP. Now, photosynthesis. As I already mentioned, it takes place within the chloroplast in case of eukaryotes, whereas it also takes place in cytoplasm and mitochondria in case of breakdown of complex molecules. That is, molecules in the sense, you guys know that one atom is not singly occupied, it just combines with the in a particular ratio according to the um, natural existing. So molecules would form and it would just yield energy, and this process takes place mainly in cytoplasm. Please note the cell's main parts are cytoplasm, mitochondria, chloroplast. These are important in case of plant cells. Nucleus also, but nucleus is not more important in case of plant cell. Cytoplasm, mitochondria, and chloroplast. Chloroplast, especially in the case of eukaryotes, because chloroplast um, have the green pigment chlorophyll, which is very essential for the process of light trapping or photosynthesis. Now, breaking of CC, that is carbon carbon single bond of complex compounds, through oxidation within the cells leads to release of considerable amount of energy, which is called respiration. Please note down, this is the exact definition given for respiration in plants. Please note, I'm just repeating it again. The definition of respiration is in plants is nothing but the breaking of the carbon carbon single bonds of complex compounds through oxidation within the cells, leading to release of considerable amount of energy. Next, you know that compounds which can be oxidized and reduced. So what are, next question would be, what are respiratory substrates? The compounds that are oxidized, that is, which are getting oxidized. which are going through oxidation process are called respiratory substrates, and usually carbohydrates are oxidized because they release energy, but proteins, fats, and even organic acids can be used as respiratory substances in some plants under certain conditions. Now, the next point is, I already told that ATP, that is adenosine triphosphate, is considered as energy currency of cell. Why it is considered as energy currency of cell? Now, what we further we are going to read about that. So, if when a cell is going through an oxidation process, the energy in the respiratory substrates, that is which has gone oxidation, would not be released into a single step into a cell. It is released slowly, step by step, slowly, because that energy is controlled by enzymes, and this chemical energy which is released stored by or stored which is released very slowly, step by step, is trapped as chemical energy in the form of ATP. So it is very important that energy released by oxidation in respiration is not directly used, but energy created in the process is used to synthesize ATP, which is which can be broke down as ADP, adenosine diphosphate, when it is necessary. That is, sometimes if the work of function of ATP is done, there need not be usage of ATP anymore for that particular day for a plant, right? In that case, ATP would be broke down into ADP plus P plus, so it would be broken down. So we can say that ATP is used to synthesize the energy would be splitted into step by step process using ATP. So we can say ATP acts as the energy currency of the cell, because the energy trapped in ATP is used for various energy requiring process of the organism, like while we breathe we need energy, while we just run, not only for us, and for plants when they just plants also show movements, right? When just fruits, they just fruit, and they just flower. So there should be some kind of changes inside the flower, in the sorry, inside the plants also, for producing such changes in them, right? So for that also, ATP, that is very much required for providing energy to the plant, so that plants would have sufficient energy to maintain its stability. Next, first topic is, do plants breathe? Well, it is just a direct question if I say, because what would I say is, mm, nothing but plants breathe, because we know from the lower grades, from I think from at least from fifth, I guess, we are studying that living organism, what is the difference between living and non-living, and to justify that plant is a living. But we would think at that time in the low grades that plant is not at all moving, but we are moving. Then how can we say that the plant is living thing, living organism? So plant also shows some movements which are not oftenly seen by naked eye. But for example, there are some examples from which we can directly say, like insectivorous plant, which a plant um, pitcher plant, which is an insectivorous plant, because there is a lack of nitrogen in the soil where the pitcher plant grows. Nepenthes, it's the biological name for a pitcher plant. It actually eats insects. Don't you guys just get thrilled? It just eats insects, pa. It is like what shall I say? Nepenthes just opens it lid. That is, the leaf is modified in the form of pitcher, and the upper part of the leaf just acts as a lid, and it just opens. And when suddenly an insect get attracts by its color or some of the smell of the plant, it just go when it just goes near to the plant, the lid, that is the opened part of the plant's leaf, would just close, and the insect would just be digested by this plant. It's an easy example to remember that plants are also having some movements. So, plants, unlike animals, plants have a system. That is, one is in the morning there would be sunlight. There are two simultaneous processes going in plants. There are two processes. One is photosynthesis, and the second is respiration, about which we are going to discuss in this chapter. You guys would wonder that during the evening time, mostly after the sun sets, we are just it is mostly recommended that no person or no person should sit under a tree after the sun sets. Do you guys just guess why it is so? Because in the evening after the sun sets, the plants just perform the opposite way. It would just respire, that is, it would take all the oxygen from the environment and release carbon dioxide, which would be the just the opposite process of the photosynthesis. So if at that time, if any human being or any creature settles under a tree, so it would be difficult for them to breathe, because the plant would be releasing carbon dioxide, and hence it is advised to not to sit under a tree after the sunset. So coming back, I just gave a fact right now for you guys to chill up. So uh, we see in animals and even in human beings there are some organ systems, but unlike us and plants, us and animals, plants have no specialized organs for exchange. For us, in human beings, we have lungs, and some of the different animals have their own, from low level organizations to higher level organization. They would be having gills, lungs, different organelles and organs for their gaseous exchange. But plants only have stomata and lenticels. You guys know what are stomata? I hope so. Because stomata, we have been studying what is stomata from the grade of 6th, I guess. So, stomata, to just recall, I would just say stomata is nothing but small tiny pores present on the surface of leaves, which are used by the plants for the gaseous exchange. They are just small holes within the plants. And now we are going to see there are several reasons why plant get along without respiratory. So we studied that we have respiratory organs, but plants do not have. Why though they don't have their own respiratory organs? There are several reasons. Some of the reasons are discussed here in our textbook ncert class 11th. So first is each plant part takes care of its own gaseous exchange needs. So that since there are stomata present on all over the body of the leaves mainly, so there is no need for a separate organ for gas exchange need. First point is um, it has its own gas exchange needs. Second is uh, so since it has its own gas exchange, so transport of gases from one part to another part would be just which is not too much. It is just small, it is very small in amount compared to us. So so therefore there is no great demands for gaseous exchange between uh, leaves and other green parts in a plant. So because roots, stems and leaves, they have their own respiration rates. For instance, roots are deep buried into the soil, so they can directly get what the from the atmospheric oxygen, they can easily breathe. Stems have their own rate. If the stems are thicker, it would be little bit more. If they are thin, then it's okay. Leaves have their own respiratory rate. That is, when compared to animals and us, plants have low respiration rates, and different parts of a plant, different parts of the plant have its own respiration rate. So and it has its own gaseous exchange, so there is no uh, complex process such as in human beings. And another note is only during photosynthesis there are large volumes, that is not during respiration, but only during photosynthesis large volumes of gases are exchanged. And and that particular time and that period, the leaf is well adapted for taking care of its own need. When cells photosynthesize, availability of oxygen is not a problem in these cells, since O2 is released within the cell because they have already trapped their oxygen and kept it as a storage during their respiration process in the night time, that is after sunset. Now third would be the reason that the distance, see, I already told all the molecules cannot travel from one part to the another part, right? So the distance that gases must diffuse should be large, but there are no bulky plants, right? Each living cell in a plant is almost closer to the another cell. So for I don't know about other parts, but for leaves it is very quite nearer when compared to woody stems, roots and other parts. When compared to stems, roots, for leaves, in case of leaves, the cells are the plant cells are nearby, very nearby, very close to each other. In stems the living cells are organized in thin layers and are located beneath the bark, and they also have openings. See, the stems have openings. These openings are called lenticels. Please note the difference between stomata and leaves. Stomata are openings which are present on the surface of the leaves, whereas lenticels are openings in stems which are present beneath the bark. Okay, you guys know, I wonder and I think that you guys would know what is a bark of a tree, right? So and so next, the cells. Now the cells, how the cells are arranged. The cells in the interior part would be dead, and they are just providing mechanical support. So Most of the cells of plant have at least a part of their surface in contact with. So, okay, if we consider that all the plants would have somewhat, there is some surface which is directly uh, in contact with the environment, right? And for other parts also, it is that facility is provided by loose packing of parenchyma cells in leaves, stems, and roots. And the parenchyma cells in leaves, stems, and roots are interconnected and interconnected and are having a network of air spaces. So, if we just summarize the process of respiration, it is nothing but we can just write it in a equation, that is, here we are producing combustion of glucose, which produces carbon dioxide and water as end products, yields energy, most of it which is given out as heat energy. That is the energy which is released. That is, it is a exothermic process. It is released as heat. The products formed are, this equation can be written as vice versa. So carbon dioxide plus water plus the heat energy release gives C6H12O6, or simply called glucose, because C6H12O6 is the molecular formula of glucose plus 6O2 molecules. Here and so, I hope you guys understood till here that C6H12O6, that is C6, that is carbon atoms are 6, H12, that is 12 hydrogen atoms, plus 6 oxygen atoms. Combinedly, we get C6H12O6, which is glucose, that is simplest form of sugar, combined with 6 molecules of O2, that is oxygen, which gives 6 CO2, 6 molecules of carbon dioxide plus 6 H2O. Water is formed and energy is released, and this process is, I'm again repeating, this process is an exothermic process because heat is released and not absorbed. So, from this equation, we can say that energy is released. Now, if you think that energy is just this energy provided would be taken up by the cell of the plants, and this energy should also be able to used by the plants for synthesizing other molecules and other functions that the cell requires to do for the plants to keep it healthy and stable. um, well, I think till here you have understood. And plant cell is just uses its glucose molecule in such a way that all the energy is not released as heat. It's just tries to trap the energy, and that trapped energy is also uh, treated as a source by the plants for meeting energy requirements if the provided energy by the combustion of glucose is not sufficient. And for this is for this much is only for today, and I hope I have covered almost everything. And the last topic in this first topic is, most importantly, glycolysis. I will just cover with this. So we know that during the process of respiration, oxidation oxidation takes place. Oxygen is utilized by the plants, and carbon dioxide, water, that is H2O water, and energy are released as products. And we know that combustion process react or combustion reaction just needs oxygen. If, for example, if some reaction takes place in which oxygen is there, we would just say that just it is a kind of combustion reaction. That's right. Am I right? If I'm wrong, please do comment after the watching video. So there are sufficient reasons that some of the plants are adapted to. It is just the adapted life of the plants. Some can live in anaerobic conditions, but most of the plants breathe aerobically. Aerobically is nothing but aerobic respiration is just but breathing or respiring in presence of oxygen, and anaerobic conditions means anaerobic means respiration without oxygen. So in any of these cases, all the living organisms just partially oxidize glucose without the help of, see, oxygen has been saved without the help of oxygen. Oxidizing or oxidation of glucose takes place. So uh, oxidation of glucose is nothing but glucose is breaking down. Glucose breakdown is done, and glucose is breakdown to pyruvic acid, which is a simpler form than glucose. And this process of converting glucose to pyruvic acid is called glycolysis. And that's for uh, and that's all for today's topic. And I hope I have completed do plants breathe, that is 14.1 in this video, and I would be starting with 14.2, that is glycolysis, in detail in the next video. I hope all would have understood the concept till now, which I have taught you. If there are any queries or any doubts, please do comment in the comment section. And thank you for your patient listening and watching my video. Thank you, guys, and good evening all.